Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Women, Sex, God, Power, a podcast that is exploring the extraordinary evolution we are moving through as a collective consciousness, the rise of divine and dark feminine power as women increasingly reclaim their autonomy outside of relationships, the downfall of modern day men, so sad, the destigmatization of sex, and the collective shadow and how that is playing out through our collective consciousness and our individual consciousness, very much limiting our self-expression, our personal power, and subtly infiltrating the decisions that we make in our everyday life. And today's episode is on how much, as a collective, we hate women. You may or may not have noticed that there is a collective obsession with wanting to destroy powerful women. And I would love to tell you that my dominant experience of this earthly realm has been one of love and acceptance and support and belonging. But unfortunately, no, it has not. Being the witch, alien, hybrid being that I am, my dominant experience has been one of ostracization, often attack, often experiencing tremendous jealousy and subtle infiltration of the plans that I had for my lifetime, disruptions, interruptions from the people around me, family members, friends, ex-partners, etc., etc. So this particular topic of the jealousy and the envy and the hatred that we hold towards women is something that I am very well versed in. Now, the first thing that I'd really like us to understand about the collective hatred that we have towards women is that it has multiple original wounds. There is not one single individual wound that is playing out through the collective consciousness and influencing women in their relationships and their friendships with other women, men in relationships with women. But essentially, what our relationship with other women, whether we're a man or a woman, and with the feminine has in common is this utter sheer terror and fear towards feminine power, towards women that have autonomy, that have their own mind, that have their own sense of personal power that cannot be infiltrated or controlled by the collective consciousness. In our society and our culture, we have a strange, insidious, very sadistic, dark obsession with oppressing women and watching powerful women fall. And you will see people contribute to this in their own subtle way, right? For example, the nitpicking of powerful women, the commenting on a woman's age, on her body, on her relationship status, scrutinizing her, right? Searching for flaws, searching for evidence, looking for any way to diminish her sense of empowerment, her self-esteem, her self-worth, to put her back in her place. Because that is the dominant collective attitude towards the majority of women and the feminine. And even in all of our psychedelic adventures, our purging, our exploration of our subconscious mind, going down into that very primordial part of the human shadow, where all of that cultural and ancestral and collective gunk exists, right? The collective shadow, which plays out through all of us, it is a accumulation of all of the dark, murky, trauma imprints, oppression, repression, patterns, encoding that have been passed down over centuries and centuries and centuries. And that has never really been truly scrutinized or examined until, I would say, the development of psychedelics, or rather the exploration of psychedelics. that really started allowing us to explore our subconscious, our collective shadow, what we have inherited collectively from society and the culture around us in a new way, which we hadn't had access to before. Because the shadow within all of us is out of sight, it's hard to access it unless we are faced with a existential crisis or we're moving through a spiritual awakening. A lot of the times we're not interacting with our shadow. We're not seeing it for what it is. We're not seeing it for the pain it holds. We're not recognizing what is mine and what has been passed on to me from the collective, from the culture. And one of the dominant things that has been passed down through this programming of oppression that seeks to keep women out of their power, men as well, but particularly women, is this fear of feminine power. Women can't be trusted. Women can't be trusted with power, which is hilarious when you look at what men are doing in the world right now with the political power they've been given. But the general theme and the general encoding, if you look at this as something that you have been encoded with, something that your subconscious has been encoded with, the general pattern that runs through the vast majority of humans on this earth when it comes to women is that women cannot be trusted with power. If women have power, they are going to manipulate, they're going to destroy, they're going to amass enormous amounts of power and wealth. If women or a woman is given too much power, then she's going to use it to manipulate, to amass enormous amounts of control. She's going to use her sexual power and prowess to control the men around her, the women around her. And you will see this playing out also in the workplace with older women who treat younger women very, very poorly because they've been given a certain level of power and status and they want to keep those younger women beneath them. So that's another thing about this power dynamic that we are experiencing in our culture with older women and younger women. Older women who are supposed to be the wisdom keepers, but pass down the wisdom and the power and the knowledge to younger women so that those younger women can flourish and blossom into their own individual power and expression. Instead, what we have now is women, older women in positions of power who don't want to inform or educate younger women. You will also see this in dynamics with mothers and daughters. The narcissistic mother who doesn't want her daughter to develop her radiance, develop her self-expression, develop her own mind, have her own sense of autonomy, right? So this plays out in many, many different shapes and forms in our culture and our collective. But ultimately, at the root of it is a fear and a terror of feminine power because we don't understand feminine power. Why do we not understand it? Because we've had masculine structures, concrete, patriarchal, pragmatic, masculine structures which value the masculine way, which value logic and pragmatism and black and white thinking and order and control over the feminine which is creative chaos, the feminine which is this all and ever expansive energy that is constantly moving, which is constantly shape-shifting, which is constantly growing, and in its truest form and essence cannot be dominated and cannot be controlled, which is what men fear the most. And because men have passed that fear and that terror onto the collective, it has poisoned our culture. It has poisoned generations and generations of humans that now have this distorted relationship with the feminine, women who have a distorted relationship with their own womanhood and demonize it and see it as something bad. And they project that onto other women. What is the consequence of that? We have a society and culture that cannot stand to see women in their power, in their autonomy, women, beautiful women, intellectually advanced women, creatively actualized women, self-expressed women, women that have the power to educate and lead. Whenever we begin to see women in our society and our culture coming up with a little bit of power, look at how quickly we rush to contribute to her downfall. Whether it's in very subtle ways, like I said, like, you know, whenever I click on a video of a beautiful woman expressing herself on my Instagram, all I need to do is check the comment section to see all of these nasty, nasty comments, mostly from other women a lot of the time, right? Is coming from other women. These nasty comments that are looking to nitpick at that particular woman, looking at ways to diminish her power, her expression, her uniqueness. So we have this malicious obsession with destroying powerful women. And we have to ask ourselves, what kind of culture and society do we live in if some part of our psyche, it doesn't have to be all of our psyche, right? If some part of our psyche as a woman or a man gets enjoyment from watching a woman suffer, from watching a woman fall, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of society and culture do we live in if there's a part of us that relishes and enjoys watching a woman fall? Like I said, the origins of this fear and this terror is not one thing. It's very complex, okay? I'm going to try and break down as much of it as I can today, but it's very complex. So I want to look at women's relationship with power, why we fear beautiful women, why we fear women who stand out, who have a certain aura or magnetism about them. Now, we could say that in an older time, you know, when we had the witch archetype, the dark feminine archetype, the woman who had a lot of power, who had essentially access to a wealth of knowledge and information from universal energy, from source energy, from a higher consciousness. Similarly to male prophets that existed in that time, who were revered and respected and admired for their power, for their insights. But then you look at the woman who is the equivalent of the male prophet, who would be branded witch, who would be branded, you know, a danger to society. Usually these women would be priestesses. They would be women who had a very, very strong connection to the divine powers that be, which gave them access to universal knowledge, which also gave them access to magic. These are women that would work with spells, with energy, because what is magic in its essence? Magic in its essence is the ability to simply harness large amounts of energy and manifest that outwardly in whatever form you want it to be, right? We talk about manifestation today. Manifestation is no different to magic. So the reason that these women were considered such a threat is because they had access to this wealth of universal knowledge and power, and they were able to channel that power and use it to gain insights which put them ahead of the rest of the collective, which put them ahead of the rest of the people in that particular time. And what happens when we're ahead of people in our knowledge, in our understanding of the way the universe operates? We are infinitely more powerful, right? We have access to knowledge and wealth of information that the average person doesn't have. So there would have been a time where women would have used that power for good. And there would have been a time where women also used that power for evil, to have a certain level of control over other women, other men. Every single event that has ever happened in the history of humanity, and I really want you to understand this, every single event is recorded within your psyche. It is recorded in the library that stores every piece of history, every significant, insignificant event that ever happened since the dawn of human existence. All of that information is stored within you, including the memories of women that came before you, and particularly women in your family who might have used magic, who might have had a lot of power, who might have had a lot of wealth, a lot of beauty, a lot of influence, and might have used that in a way that was negative. Okay? So there might be these unspoken contracts or codes in your family that women can't be that powerful, women can't be that beautiful, women can't draw that much attention to themselves, because the last time a woman in your family or lineage did that, she was maybe killed off, she was maybe brutally injured, maybe she was ostracized from a community. So if you look at that fear scarcity pattern that has been handed down to you around money, around power, around standing out, around being seen, being radiant, being recognized, being famous, being known. There's strong collective programming for women in this, particularly women from my culture, Middle Eastern culture. Don't be too visible. Don't be too seen, because there is a history of women in our lineage and our ancestry who allowed themselves to be visible, allowed themselves to take up space. And look what happened when they did that. Look what happened when they made themselves visible. And look what happens in today's age with celebrities, with public figures, women who allow themselves to really be seen and really be visible and go, here I am. This is all of me. These are all my flaws. These are all my vulnerabilities. I'm laying it on the table for you. I'm showing you who I am. It's a very vulnerable position to be in as a woman. It's a very vulnerable position. And that autonomy, having that level of autonomy or financial freedom, wealth, visibility is still a very foreign thing to most women. Rightly so. Because there is collective programming that is telling you you're not allowed to be that visible, you're not allowed to be that seen, but there's also the family programming. Then we can look at other things such as women in your family that might harbor a lot of jealousy or envy towards you for choosing to shine your light, for being the star child that stands out, for being the one woman in the family that is breaking all of these ancestral patterns and choosing to go against all of those narratives of women need to stay small and invisible and behind four walls, serving the men and the children in their family, but that is their rightful place. In today's culture, we do not have a lot of examples in the media, in the public realm, of women who really embody this queen archetype, this priestess archetype. The woman who is equal in status to the prophet, to the male philosopher, to the Jordan Petersons of our time. The woman that is equally as revered for her knowledge, for her power, for her wisdom, right? So there is a collective war on women, on a woman having the same status and the same right to express herself as men that hold the same wisdom and sometimes even less, right? I have personally experienced this in my own work as someone who is a channeler and a conjurer and who brings through ideas from universal consciousness on a daily basis. I've experienced men online saying things to me like, where did you plagiarize this from? What man did you get this from? What book did you read this from? When the reality is that every piece of information or knowledge that I've ever put out online or ever shared with you guys comes straight from source consciousness. It comes straight from source and is channeled through me. I don't get it from books. I don't get it from what I've read or what I take in, information that I take in from outside of myself, because I want to remain a clear vessel. So I'm actually very, very strict about not absorbing content from elsewhere, not reading on other people's ideas, not reading books. That might sound very ignorant, but I have a very strict policy on not allowing other people's ideas or imprints to infiltrate my subconscious and influence my creative output. So every time I sit down to do one of these episodes, the place that I'm speaking from is that universal consciousness. I'm allowing myself to become an open vessel through which source energy, universal energy can move through me and deliver what needs to be delivered in the moment. But we have this attitude towards women of, well, women can't be equally as powerful and equally as revered as men. They cannot be trusted in the same way that we can trust men. So we will still prioritize male teachers. We will still prioritize male voices in society. And if we do happen to come across a woman that has access to a vast amount of knowledge, we will view her with suspicion. We will view her with envy, with jealousy, with, again, through the eyes of scrutiny, scrutinizing her to see what it is about her that's untrustworthy, what it is about her that could potentially be a threat to our own well-being. We don't do that with men. You may have noticed that we do not do that with men. We do not look at men when they are delivering a, when they are demonstrating that they have a certain level of knowledge or wisdom or understanding about the human psyche, we don't look at them with through the same lens of suspicion. We only do this with women. So when we start to look at this fear that other women have towards women and how deeply rooted it is, right? Part of this fear, where it originates from, is that sister wound, that betrayal, that being overlooked and being forgotten, being replaced by a woman who is younger, who is more beautiful, who is more successful, who is more desired. So that is something that exists very, very deeply in the collective consciousness when it comes to women and their relationships with other women. A lot of this comes down to survival. I, as a woman, need to outdo another woman because there can only be one winner. There can only be one woman that is radiant. There can only be one woman that, you know, gets the man, gets the attention, gets the position of power and status. There can only be one. So I'm going to have to choose my success and my wealth and prioritize me and go as far as to screw another woman over, to betray her, to, you know, work against her silently in the background, subtly, whilst maybe pretending to be rooting for her, pretending to want her success, when actually the inner narrative that a lot of women hold in their friendships is the complete opposite. So you get this weird misalignment in some female friendships where women will say that they want you to succeed, they will say that they want you to flourish, but their energy is saying the complete opposite. That is this survival pattern that is running through, again, the collective psyche of all women, the feminine shadow of women. I'm going to get into that in a second. This survival pattern of there can only be one winner, there can only be one woman who is radiant, who succeeds, who is recognized, who gets the attention, who, you know, is the most powerful and the most wanted. That is a very, very, very old collective thought form, and it doesn't need to exist anymore. We exist in a universe that is infinitely abundant. Everyone has access to abundance. Every single human on this planet has access to the same abundance. It might not seem that way because of the way that the powers and the structures that be, the matrix has been set up. But in fact, in actuality, from a universal perspective, every woman on this planet has access to the same amount of abundance. It's just whether she chooses to overcome that collective programming and narrative that is telling her otherwise and chooses to really tap in to universal consciousness. This is another thing I really want you to understand. There is the consciousness of a collective shadow, and then there is the consciousness of the universe. The collective shadow is scarcity, it's fear, it's resistance to what is, it's repression, it's limitation. The consciousness of the universe is the opposite of all that. It is abundance, it is liberation, it is joy, it is beauty, it is wealth, it is creativity. So you as a woman get to choose every day which one you are going to tune into, okay? You get to decide and you get to choose every single day of your life which of these two am I going to operate from. The collective shadow that tells me there can only be one winner and there can only be one woman that succeeds and finds the man of her dreams and gets all the money and gets all the things, or universal consciousness in which every scenario that I could ever imagine for my life, every possibility exists. The other important topic that I want to touch on with this particular theme of hating women is collective thought forms. The war on women that happens in their own mind through these collective thought forms, through the infiltration of collective thought forms. These collective thought forms shape our perception of our beauty, our self-worth, our sense of power, how worthy we believe we are of the things that we desire. So an example of women being attacked and infiltrated by collective thought forms, which contributes to this, hatred of women, this fear of the feminine, this fear of not being good enough, this fear of having to this obsession with needing to compete with other women. One of the most prevalent thought forms that infiltrates women and attacks her on a daily basis is around the beauty standards. So around, your lips need to be bigger, your breasts need to be bigger, your thighs need to be smaller, you need to look a certain way, and you need to project a certain image in order to be deemed worthy. And you're seeing now women pumping their faces full of plastic, and how women are increasingly beginning to resemble one another, and that authenticity of beauty, that originality and subtlety of feminine beauty is beginning to fade increasingly as women allow themselves to be taken over by these collective thought forms that are infiltrating their subconscious and making them believe that they're not good enough, that they need to change their facial structure, they need to make these adjustments, they need to have all kinds of operations and surgical procedures in order to align with the collective narrative of what feminine beauty should look like. Now, when you are strong in yourself, when you are so full of your own love and essence and fully embodied and rooted in your body, there is nothing outside of you that has space to take up residence within you, within your mind, within your being, within your heart. There is no collective thought form or narrative that has space to take up residence inside of you, because you are full of your own essence. You are full of your own love. You are full of your own frequency. This is something that is so, so important for women to understand, because there is a war on women. There is a war on the feminine. There is a deliberate plan and infiltration that is happening from the patriarchy, from the powers that be, to keep women obsessively constricted and restricted within this one-dimensional box of what femininity should look like. And that includes having these surgical procedures on their face to make themselves look like a certain type of beauty, to make themselves match the stereotypical, again, white man's perspective of what beauty looks like. This is part of a war on women. If we can make them so distracted and so obsessed with their physical appearance and so infiltrated by the collective thought forms, other people's voices, social narratives of what they should and must be, then we take them out of their power. Because when a woman is not embodied in her body, when she is not fully rooted and seated in her own body, when her soul is not present in her body, there is space and there is room for all kinds of dark shit to take up residence. And I know that sounds really, really intense, but it's honestly the reality and the truth of the matter. There is space for all kinds of outside noise and garbage and crap from men, from podcast bros, from your parents, from the culture, from your siblings, from your work colleagues, from the media, to infiltrate you and take up residence in your subconscious and start playing out through your mind, through your being, subtly influencing the decisions and the choices you make. So the way that you know as a woman that you are embodied in your power is when your thoughts are aligned with abundance. When your thoughts are aligned with, this is my plan for life, this is what my soul came here to create, this is what I want for myself, and it's possible, and I'm worthy of it, and nothing is going to interrupt that plan. Nothing is going to prevent me from fulfilling my divine soul mission. Nothing is going to convince me that I am less beautiful and less worthy and less radiant and less powerful than I truly am. Nothing in this three-dimensional sphere of existence that is trying to infiltrate and take up residence and take up space every single day and convince me that I'm less than, put me back in my box, repress me, strip my self-worth, strip me of my self-esteem, strip me of my own individual narrative. None of that shit has space or room to take up residence inside of me, because I am fully rooted in my own power. I'm fully rooted in my own essence. I'm at home in my body, and my body is perfect as it is. The way I look is perfect as it is as a woman. I don't need to change anything. And what anybody else says outside of me When I have men or people making nasty remarks, I know it's because they're operating from the collective shadow. I know it's because they're operating from their own fear, scarcity, programming, from their own conditioning, from their own religious cultural trauma. They're operating from that very low vibrational place, and I'm not operating from there. I'm operating from my soul, my soul's authentic voice. I'm operating from universal source consciousness that understands that the way I was designed is perfectly aligned for everything I need in this lifetime. So every time you are experiencing people coming at you with this negativity, with these projections, with these psychic attacks, women with their subtle comments, when you're sharing your plans, when you're sharing your dreams, when you have these ambitions and you have family members or your mother or women who are trying to infiltrate or put you back in your box because they don't like how much power you have. They don't like that you're moving towards your dreams. They don't like that you have so much ambition and that you have these big visions and that you're on the path to creating them. Whenever you start to come in contact with people who are trying to project that negativity and that subtle, energetic, psychic attack, you in that moment get to come home to your body and say to yourself, I want to act from a place of abundance and sovereignty, and I'm going to choose my own narrative. I'm going to write my own narrative. I'm going to decide what beauty, what success, what abundance, what power looks like to me. And if you can get to that space, then there is nothing outside of you, no man, no institution, no friend, no person, no alien being, no collective thought form that can infiltrate you and influence you otherwise, influence you in the opposite direction to the path that you are on. It's really, really important that we spot these patterns and these narratives and how they play out, because you will notice that they have been playing out and feeding into your subconscious since you were a girl. Look at a lot of the fairy tales we were fed. Snow White and the Evil Queen, Cinderella and her evil stepmother, Rapunzel and the stepmother or the woman was pretending to be her mother, but then in the end, is keeping her locked in this tower and feeding off of her radiance, feeding off of her light. I don't remember if the Disney film is in alignment with the original story, but in the Disney adaptation, the mother cuts off her hair in the end, cuts off Rapunzel's hair, which is the source of Rapunzel's power and light and radiance. Again, Snow White and the Evil Queen who is depicted as this older, jealous, envious archetype of woman who doesn't want to see this radiant, innocent girl who has so much influence in her own way through the purity of her heart, doesn't want to see her overtaking her in any way, the Evil Queen. So these narratives of older woman is jealous of younger woman, older woman or any woman in general in a position of power will do anything to keep another woman down, to keep her from rising up in the world and taking up her rightful place in the world, claiming her abundance. These narratives have been fed to us from very, very early on in our upbringing, and have influenced the way that we look at other women. Because of course, if you're seeing these Disney films where you're being subtly infiltrated with a narrative that there can only be, again, one woman that wins, there can only be one woman that is radiant. And if you are radiant and if you are beautiful like Cinderella or Rapunzel or Snow White, you're going to be punished for it. You're going to be attacked. So it's better that you stay small, and it's better that you stay quiet and you don't get too, ambitious, and you don't raise your voice too loudly, and you don't allow yourself to become too visible, because you know what happens to women who become visible and allow themselves to take up that much space. I don't think we have any fairy tales where there is that same dynamic between men and fathers and their children, or men in a position of kingship and men who are beneath them who might be coming up in the world. But you always see that narrative with older women and younger women. And of course, that massively influences the way we have relationships with other women. and particularly older women, right? And then there's a fact of the matter that older women have not been given their rightful, the respect that they deserve in society, that we have been made to fear aging, fear getting older. Oh my God, that's the worst thing that could ever happen to a woman. When in actuality, a woman who is in her 50s, 60s, 70s, who's in her crone era, is in her most powerful era of all. She has all of that wisdom and knowledge and experience, and she's so embodied in herself that she's just over society and culture dictating anything to her, right? She is in such a powerful position that she's the sort of woman that can walk into a room and command the entire room, that can have an enormous amount of influence over the people around her. And we don't see that narrative of women in these fairy tales, in these stories where, these older women are always depicted as being evil and bitchy and the ones to look out for and the ones to be most careful of, because look what happens when you're a younger woman and you're radiant and you're beautiful. You're going to be, again, put down and attacked. Do you see all the ways that stories, movies, archetypal figures that we've been fed through the lens of a man's perspective, again, because most of this is through the lens of a white man's perspective, influences our relationship with power as women? So this is a war on women. And I say it's a war on women. It's not a war on girlhood. It's a war on women. Because have you noticed the difference in how we treat little girls versus how we treat women? The moment a girl begins menstruating and she's hovering somewhere between girlhood and womanhood, have you noticed how suddenly we do a 180 in the treatment that we give her? We go from, encouraging and complimenting little girls. And I see this all the time, right? I'm constantly analyzing and watching and observing people around me when I go out. You see this all the time, the way older women will compliment and encourage little girls the moment you are in your womanhood, fully rooted in your womanhood. There is a 180 that happens. There's a 180-degree turn that happens in the way that we start to treat women who are in their adolescence, somewhere between girlhood and womanhood. And it is in that in-between space where a girl is not quite a woman. That is the most delicate, fragile space. That is the space in which she needs the most nurturing. She needs the most encouragement. She needs her self-esteem to be built. She needs a solid foundation upon which she can build a sense of identity and her own empowerment. She needs a support system of other women and also male figures, trustworthy male figures around her. And the reality for most women is they don't get that. So what happens in that in-between space? She begins to fear her womanhood because she notices, because girls are so sensitive, she notices the sort of treatment that other women are receiving as women. In spite of the fact that she begins to develop into her physical body, she begins to take on the form of a woman, a lot of the time, she stays in that little girl consciousness. Why? Because we don't attack girls, we only attack women. So that's the other part that is essential to understand about this hatred towards women and terror of feminine power. So many women do not fully develop into their womanhood because they are terrified of leaving that state of girlhood. They are terrified of fully transitioning into their womanhood, taking up space, enjoying being this sexual, sensual being, enjoying the pleasures of life, enjoying being radiant, enjoying being creatively explorative, having these rich, interesting relationships, exploring her magnetism and her power. So many women get stuck in that transition between girlhood and womanhood because they are so afraid of fully developing into women, because they know at a subconscious level what happens if they fully begin to come into their autonomy and power. So this is something else that I want you to watch in yourself as a woman. Where are you afraid of your womanhood? Where are you afraid of embodying more of that feminine power? That feminine expression that is not afraid of her sexuality, that is not afraid of being beautiful and radiant, that is not afraid of taking up space. Where have you limited those parts of your expression because you are terrified of judgment, rejection, ostracization, abandonment from the culture around you, from your family members, from your friends who are maybe also stuck in that girl consciousness and haven't really claimed their womanhood? You don't need to ask anyone for permission. That's your right as a woman. That is your right. You don't need to ask anyone for permission to claim that part of your feminine expression that will allow you to comfortably exist in the world, in your power, and not be dictated to, not be told or dictated to or controlled when it comes to your expression, the way you dress, the way you show up on social media, in your relationships. All of these areas of your life are revealing to you where you are oppressing your power, where you are choosing to retract and hide and limit yourself because you're truly afraid of being in your womanhood. Which brings me to my next point. And oh my God, I could go on about this for days on end. I could give a freaking sermon on this whole subject. I'm about to take you guys to church, so listen carefully, okay? This is a vow that I made to myself a very long time ago after years and years of dimming my expression. I promised myself that I was never ever going to lower my radiance, dim my creative power or my talents, hide the depth of my expression in order to prevent other women and men from feeling inadequate or inferior, or in order to avoid evoking feelings of jealousy and envy, because it is not my responsibility how other people respond to my expression and my power. So I relinquish that responsibility because it is not my responsibility. My only responsibility is to show up in the world as myself, as my fully expressed creative self, and allow my light to shine and influence other people to be more in their power. And I relinquish the job and the burden of making myself responsible for how other people react to my expression. So this is a thing I want you to understand as a woman. It is not your job. It is not part of your soul assignment to limit or dim yourself in any shape or form in order to prevent revealing or triggering other people's inadequacies, other people's fears, other people's sense of inferiority, men and women. Because this is the thing about when we step into our power of expression and our radiance, when we choose to really move towards our dreams, move towards our ambitions, we are going to naturally highlight and reflect back at other people where they are not doing those things. Where they are choosing to stay small, where they are choosing to stay repressed, where they are choosing not to heal. But it is not your job as a woman or a man, but especially as a woman, to lower your radiance or dim your power or make yourself less ambitious, to dim the size of your dreams or your goals or your personal visions, to prevent other people feeling insecure, inadequate, or jealous. We wonder why women are so ridiculously exhausted. This is why, okay? If you don't take anything else away from this episode, man fadlik, please, as we say in Arabic, please take this away. Women are exhausted because they have taken it upon themselves to make themselves responsible for not triggering or arousing feelings of jealousy in other women, for not triggering and arousing feelings of sexual desire in men. Your decision to take on the responsibility of not triggering other people and not making them feel inferior is exhausting you. It is exhausting you. We wonder why women are so exhausted. This is why you're so exhausted, babe. This is it, okay? This is the root, because you have made yourself responsible for how everybody else responds and reacts to you when you are in your power and your radiance. That is not your fucking job. It never was. It was a collective cultural poison that was infiltrated into your psyche that made you believe that it is your responsibility how other people feel around you, and that it's your job to make everybody else feel comfortable. And in order to make them feel comfortable, that means that you have to lower and dim your expression. And I want you to relinquish the burden and responsibility of taking that on right now. Because how on earth can you be in your power and do here what you came here to do if you are constantly micromanaging everybody else's emotions and feelings around you? How on earth? You can't. That's it, okay? You cannot fulfill your soul assignment. You cannot live the life that you came here to live when you are constantly micromanaging your partner, your mother, your sister, your friends, everyone around you, people on social media who you don't even fucking know, and how they're responding to your expression. Your only job is to show up and give this life everything you can. Everything you can. That is your only job. Responsibility for how other people feel towards you, people getting pissed off or reacting or getting angry because you're choosing to show up in your full radiance, absolutely not your job. Never was, never will be. Let it go. Literally let it go. Literally say out loud in this moment, I relinquish the burden and the responsibility of taking on how other people feel about my expression. Please say it out loud with me. I relinquish the burden and the responsibility of micromanaging how other people feel about me when I am in my power and I am expressing my radiance. That is not my job. It is not my job. I let it go now. And if you can't let it go now, and it needs some practice, then every single day of your life, when you notice that you are shrinking yourself or dimming yourself because of how other people are responding to your power, remember this as a mantra. It is not my responsibility. It is not my responsibility to manage how other people respond to me when I am in my power. When you are in your full radiance, when you are fully embodied in your body, nothing else has the space to infiltrate you, which includes other people's projections and their jealousy and their irritants and their anger and their insecurity towards you choosing to be who you are, okay? This is how we keep women down. This is how we keep women too exhausted to follow their soul path, to fulfill their dharma, to fulfill their creative mission. This is how we drain the life force out of them, by making them responsible for things that are not their responsibility. So let it go. Let it the fuck go. Woo! I think I'm going to end on that note because, yeah, this has been an intense episode. And honestly, there's so much more that I wanted to fit into this. There's so much more because this is such a deep topic, but I don't want to overload or overwhelm you with any more. So I think I'm going to end it there for now. And just a quick one. Before I finish, if you are loving these episodes, finding them useful, educational, helpful, empowering, please make sure that you follow me on my Spotify so that you never miss an episode. Also, with every single person that follows me, it means that my community can grow. And when I get to 100 followers, I can start to release more explicit content, which I would not feel very comfortable speaking about publicly. So I will be able to release that content and make it available to my community, my subscribers. So please make sure that you hit that follow button. And I hope that you found this episode useful, and I will see you next time.